as you talk to people, there are pieces of almost everybody's story
Mm.
that are going to be able to help you with perspective that maybe that you don't need now, but that you might need down the road.
If you don't have enough money saved for your retirement, like me and millions of other people, you're not alone. Welcome to the Wise Retirement Podcast. We'll learn how to invest, save, and earn more toward a comfortable retirement. Hi, I'm Angela Kay.
And I'm Reginald Thornton, along for this ride as well. Did you know that 20% of Americans age 50 and above have no retirement savings at all? Even worse, 3 times that amount are concerned that they don't have enough saved for a comfortable retirement.
Reg and I will talk with experts in their field, explore catch-up strategies, share success stories that we hope are inspiring, and learn about family wealth-building techniques that actually work. We'll also break down those complex financial topics into clear, actionable steps that everyone can understand and use.
Welcome to the ride, everyone. Well, today we are joined by a special guest from the West Coast. Sabado is going to break down practical real life steps so we can follow in his footsteps to retire at the age 51. Welcome to the show, sir.
Hey, welcome. Happy to be here.
Happy to have you. Happy to have you, for sure. So I know you and Angie talked before, but I want to jump right in because when I saw you retired at 51, first of all, I got jealous. Let me just start there. But secondly, I need to know from you how you got to this point. Was this something that were you always thinking I'm going to retire early, or this just kind of fell into place based on things that as you were working?
Ultimately, it really kind of just fell into place. I didn't have a long drawn out plan that I wanted to retire early, but I had been taking steps. Like most people, I'm always planning for tomorrow.
Yep.
And one of the major things for me was I wanted to make sure I knew when tomorrow was. And my wife and I had gone to a financial advisor. We looked at our numbers, saw how much time we had, and we continued that relationship with the financial advisor. And then there was a point in time where I changed jobs and moved into this environment that was really toxic. So then I started having more detailed conversations about some of those numbers and started going through the what if scenarios. And it was, what if I retire then and at this time and at this time? And when we got to 51, and I would like to quote him, but I can't, but he said that in the Monte Carlo scenarios, and the Monte Carlo scenarios are the scenarios that plays out investment scenarios for your plan. So your expected spending and all that. And it tells you the likelihood of success of your plan, of your financial plan.
Okay.
So anyway, he did the Monte Carlo scenario. He said, according to the scenarios, he says there's a 95% chance that you run out of money or that you are good, but there's a 5% chance that you run out of money when you're 95 or something like that. and so I said to him, maybe I'll just wait a few years. And so then he asked me, he says, why would you sacrifice the best years of your life for the worst years of your life? And again, there was a 95% chance that my plan was going to hold up anyway. And when you start thinking about it rationally, you realize that at 95, I don't really care. I mean, at that point, yeah. So I just decided to do it, and I haven't looked back since.
Wow.
Okay.
That's impressive.
But Sabado, what, as a former HR executive, we know you're retired from that field, period. What did you learn as an HR executive to help people get to where you are right now? So you started saving late, if I'm correct. You started saving late, right?
Yeah.
But you're still retired at 51. Please help. How did that work?
I would say that my savings was always in fits and starts because I'd save and then I'd buy a house. I'd save, then I get divorced. I save, and then there's something that happens. There's all these things that happen.
Yeah.
And as an HR person, the thing I would tell people is always make sure that you put enough into your 401k to get the employer match because that's free money.
Okay.
And educate yourself about compound interest so you know what people are talking about when they talk about compound interest. Because the fact is most people are under this illusion that you have to have $1 million to retire. And the
Right.
reality is that all is dependent on your expenses. So if you have high expenses, if you have high debt, then $1 million may not even be enough.
Right.
And then,
Okay.
but when you go back and you look at the numbers, there's like 58 million or so. I just did a video on it, but it's like 58 or 78 million people that are retired in the United States. The median retirement amount that people have saved is like $200,000.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have all these retired people
Mm.
with retirement savings of $200,000, then how is that possible? It's because
Yeah.
people don't have $1 million lifestyles. There's the idea of what
Mm.
you have when you retire, and then there's the idea of having money continue to be invested and to grow. And what people don't realize is how money works. And I think the other thing I would say
Huh.
as an HR person, I had the opportunity. I was a chief HR officer, so for different organizations at different times. So I had the opportunity to interact with a lot of different people. And a lot of times, what we have a tendency to do is we'll look at people and make a determination, whether it's conscious or unconscious, of whether or not this person's going to have useful information.
Mm.
Well, in HR, what you really are is an information broker, because I had thousands of people's all their information. But as you talk to people, there are pieces of almost everybody's story that are going to be able to help you with perspective that you don't need now, but that you might need down the road. And so take the opportunity that you have as you're working, to talk to people, and never put too much behind any job, because at the end of the day,
Yeah.
the idea is, these jobs, they're great. I mean, having a job is, it's clutch, it's important. But at the end of the day, you are an employer or an employee, and that is the company. And the company is in the business of staying in business, no matter
Making
how
money.
making money. So no matter how valuable you are as as a person, and there's cases where I didn't get laid off because I brought a certain level of value, and I've seen that happen to people. But the decisions that are made about people's livelihoods are generally a lot more subjective than I think a lot of people would be comfortable with if they were behind the scenes.
As I've gotten
Wow.
older, I've believed that for a while, just given how things have gone around me at different jobs. But it's
Yeah.
good to hear somebody else say that, like verbalize it. Yeah.
Well, the idea is, if when you go back and you look at who I am as a person, I have a personal mission statement that I've been living by since I was about 22, 23 years old, is to uplift the human condition in any way that I can. So everything that I've done has been towards helping other people
Mhm.
and helping to uplift other people. So I carry a lot of what goes on in the world around me, which is why I have the YouTube channel, because most retirement channels are trying to sell a product,
Mhm.
and the only thing I'm doing is trying to get people to reimagine what's possible. So I don't on my channel, I don't even care. I mean, I know it's Sabado, the everyday retiree, but I'm less concerned about whether or not people retire. I want people to live their best lives based on good information. I want people to get out of debt. I want people to live just solid lives so they're not super stressed out, because I'm on the other side. And when you're on the other side, those layers come off.
Right.
It's like Jay-Z says, get that dirt off your shoulders.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
That's what happens. But I know that, again, looking at the numbers, only about less than 3% of people retire early. And, so then when you peel those numbers back, people that look like me, the number's even smaller. So I recognize
Mhm.
that there's a lot of dynamics that sit beneath that. But if people take those steps, then they have a more fulfilling life, because they're not burdened and saddled by debt. They are doing things that fill their cups as opposed to stuff that they have to do. And that then bleeds into your relationship with your family, your friends, who you are as a person, how your own relationship with yourself. So I want people to have those. And because at some point, and I know people, it's funny, I'm actually going to Atlanta in a couple weeks, but I got a buddy out in Atlanta who lost his job, and he hasn't been able to find another job. When you're in your 50s, it's hard to find another job,
Yes,
because
sir. Yes,
for
sir.
for a host of reasons.
Yep.
Right.
Some direct and some coded, but that's a whole nother
Yeah.
conversation. That's the
Yeah.
HR 101 conversation for people over 50. So
Okay.
You talked about on your channel, you just mentioned how you want people to come there and just think about imagining what could be. So
yeah.
that said, let's kind of talk a bit about a few things Gen Xers can do to kind of get
Okay.
to where you are, starting today. I noticed you spoke about redefining retirement, maximize your 401k, which you just mentioned, reducing expenses in your life. So to the point that you were making about you don't need $1 million if you're not living a $1 million lifestyle. And you also mentioned using work strategically. And one of the last things I have here is planning for a softer retirement. So can you touch on those just a bit, just to, kind of guide this Gen X crew? Because um, based on what I've learned since Angie and I have been doing this, like we are the first generation to not have a pension. We
Mhm.
are the generation that's responsible mostly for our retirement, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that's 100% right. There's a couple things. Now, there's a lot in what you just asked, so I'm going to give it to you in a way that keeps you interested in hearing what I have to say because I could
Oh
go on
no.
for hours about this.
Yeah.
But I think the first thing that a person needs to do is they need to do a realistic audit of their finances. Most people don't know what they spend. They think they do. It's like
Mm.
I liken it to if you ever helped a friend move, they always say, "Oh, I got all the big stuff, so it's going to be easy because I got all
Right.
the small stuff." But then you
Right.
end up spending 2 days helping that person move because they got more small stuff than they do big stuff.
Yeah.
It's the same thing with your finances. What happens is people don't know what they're paying. So as an example, people have credit card debt. And I don't know what the average credit card debt is, but let's say the average credit card debt is $3,000. And let's say the interest rate is 28%. People don't
Mhm.
know what that is. So
Yeah.
they don't know what they're actually paying. They just know they're paying that minimum payment. And people don't know, they forget about those Netflix subscriptions that they have sitting out there, or that I always like to joke around about the Disney Channel subscription, but your kids are 25. But because people forget about that. So I think the first thing that a person needs to do is they really need to audit their lifestyle and figure out how much of this is how much of this is necessary and how much of this is unnecessary and how much of this did I not know about, and start to
Mm.
put that plan together to manage that to get to the place you want to be. But also, I think once you do that, then you got to set a goal. You got to figure out where it is that you want to go. Again, I could talk to a room full of 30-year-olds that want to retire early. Or I could ask a room of 30-year-olds who wants to retire early, and everybody's hand's going to go up.
Mhm.
But the problem is there's a lack of discipline that sits underneath that, and
Mhm.
unfortunately, we don't start to develop that discipline until things become real. And unfortunately, things don't become real until either something happens or we get a little bit older and we have a little bit more perspective because we have friends that are in different situations. So I
Right.
think the first thing is, audit your lifestyle and then set up a goal. And that goal can change. It could change for the better, it could change for the worse. And then focus on getting out of that high interest credit card debt because that's what eats people up. So I think the
Mhm.
first step is to be realistic about that and cut out the crap because we go and there's a rapper named E40. He's out in the West Coast, and he says,
Yep.
don't buy an $80,000 car before you buy a house.
Right.
Okay,
And the
good. Practical.
and the problem is, I know a lot of people with $80,000 cars that don't have houses. And in fact, most of the people that are driving $80,000 cars don't have houses because it's about showing people what you have as opposed to having what you have. So I think that would be the first step, because once you do that, then you start to understand, then the other steps start to open up in terms of, you got to put money in your 401k. You've got to put money in a place if you're going to retire early. The 401k is good once you hit 59 and a half.
Mhm.
But then you got to figure out what you're going to do in the meantime. Put together and save some money outside of the 401k in a way that is going to give you access to it so you can use that to cover that time. And the other thing that's really important that a lot of people ask when they get to the point but don't think about ahead of time is
Mhm.
healthcare.
Mhm.
Healthcare is, I don't think people really understand in the current conversation about healthcare. The conversation is about rural hospitals and stuff like that.
Mm.
But in a state like, and I think Georgia is one of them that has Medicaid. States that are in Medicaid are going to now have rules that are designed to force people to work
Mm.
before they can get benefits. That was all part of that big ugly bill, that
Yeah, yeah,
that
yeah.
big bill.
That.
Yeah, and so that was part of that. And so you have to have there's work requirements and stuff that are part of that. Again, you could double check all of this, but I believe that to be factual. In a state like California, it's a little bit different. But I don't think people realize and get their head around the idea of what the impact is going to be for them. Because now you're in a situation where you want to have health care, but you don't have the safety net because you're still within working age and you're supposed to be working. And so figure those pieces out. Again, there's so much in getting to that place. Then I think the other thing is I think people have to make sure that their spouse is aligned with whatever the decision is. So my wife and I both retired around the same time. So it was easy for us. But have those conversations and understand what what retirement looks like for you. Because
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to before we go on, I wanted to touch on what you said about healthcare because I don't know if you had an HSA account when you were in working, but that is an account where you can set aside money for your health, and you can use that money, and it's a great way to grow your money financially. You can earn interest on it. But I just want to put that out there for folks.
Those are, the beauty of a healthcare savings account, HSA, is that they're triple tax advantaged. You see, and so you don't get tax free. The money you put in is tax free. It grows tax free, and you can use it tax free.
Right.
The funny thing is, I never had a healthcare savings account ever.
Ah.
I knew about them, but the rules have changed over time as well. So I never really go to the doctor. I mean, I do for my annual stuff.
Yep.
But I don't have a bunch of health conditions.
That's a blessing.
An HSA is it's clutch. I think anything that secures your future. We go to college because it gives us an opportunity to perhaps get a better job somewhere down the line or be more attractive. At least people don't cross you off of a list as quickly. But again, I think it's always forward looking. So there's a lot of things that are important, I think, to get somebody to retire. But I think ultimately, people want to retire, but they're not willing to do what it takes to get to that place. People want to continue to drive that $80,000 car. People want to continue to wear designer clothes. And then when you look at people that are retired, they're not doing any of that, but they're the happiest cats on the planet because you've won the game. You don't have to show anything to anybody else. So again, I think there's a lot of pieces to it, but it's just being intentional about your life and being intentional about where you want to go. And I think the other thing you mentioned is, looking at sloping down. A lot of people look at retirement as a cliff. I say, I'm going to retire and then just drop off the cliff. But psychologically, most people can't handle that because people like me have been working since I was 12 years old.
Right.
Throwing papers and doing all kinds of stuff. So my point is that if, to just go and not do anything and sit on the couch, that's why you hear people make the comment that, people retire, then they go die because then they have these sedentary lifestyles and they don't do anything. And that's why I'm involved with the University of California Master Gardeners. That's why I have the YouTube channel. That's why I do a lot of the things that I do. Not because I don't want to be bored. It's because I want to make sure that I continue the gifts that I have and the things that I have the opportunity to do and my personal mission statement, they continue to drive me. And I call that, creating my portfolio of purpose. We talk about the financial pieces. The financial pieces are easy. You either have the money or you don't. But if you don't get your head right, that's the foundation. If your head's not right, it's just like people that win the lottery. You win $50 million and you go broke. Well, how does that happen? Because everybody in your family's broke. You've never seen this kind of money, and you had to go out and find a bunch of things in order to satisfy you that cost you money. And you forgot that this $80 million house has property taxes of $20,000. It's a whole cycle. I hope that answered the question. I know there's a lot of there in that question. I know there's a lot of there in the answer. But again, I think that it's not as it's as simple as it sounds, but not as easy as we want it to be.
Yeah, no. That makes perfect sense. And I was really just kind of highlighting things to give you the ramp to, kind of jump off and do exactly what you did, which would give us what you did, a broad stroke of these are the things that got to be done. And the only way you can get to where I am is to, start this stuff at a reasonable time in your life,
I'll tell you something interesting. One of the things that I do on my channels, I do what are called chats with Sabado. So people could set up time and we get on a Google Meet and we have a conversation for about an hour or so. And we just talk about stuff that goes on in their life, which is interesting because I think when you have the retirement conversation, there's different people. You have the 30-year-olds who just say, I want to retire by the time I'm 45. But when you start having a real conversation, you challenge people to do the work, you start to realize that that population starts to get smaller.
Oh, yeah.
So in my chats with Sabado, people that I'm talking to, I was talking a lot in the beginning of the year. I was talking to a lot of people out in Northern Virginia that were in the I think they call it the DCA or something like that, but that were affected by all these government
Government layoffs.
layoffs and stuff like that. I had a
Yeah.
director from the IRS. I had a police chief from the Capitol Police.
Mm,
Wow.
I had, you start to have these people because because these are people that have been incredibly successful their whole lives. I had a guy that owned a technology company, but these are people that have been successful their whole lives, saved all the money, done all the stuff, but what's holding them back isn't the dollars and cents, it's what's up here.
right.
And so if you can get your head right and you could focus on, and I hate saying that because that usually sounds like somebody that's screwing up that you don't want to deal with.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
But it's if you could get your intentionality on point and focus on um and have the discipline to follow the steps, then you're going to be in good shape. Because even with the financial advisor going through our budget, creating our budget, putting everything down, and then sticking to that and understanding some of the different contingencies, that takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of work. And
Okay.
it's so you have to do the work, you have to be intentional, you have to be disciplined. If it's a hope and a dream, then you're going to end up right back where you started because there's a lot of things that you have to take into account.
Fair
I
enough.
mean, honestly, it feels good just hearing you say, if you take the steps and be intentional, we can do some things. We can catch up, we can make some progress. So that's encouraging.
100%. And I didn't really get serious about the whole thing until I was about, I don't know, 38, 39, and really putting money away. But I was really intentional about it and made sure that I maxed everything out, and I did. And I had some stuff saved, so it wasn't like I started from scratch. But
Mm-hmm.
then I don't buy really expensive stuff, like big stuff. And I think about money in terms of how money can work for me.
Right.
And that's why I say it's so important for people to educate themselves about money, because we think we know about money, but most people have no clue about money. When you think about the what happens with a mutual fund and you get dividends paid back into the mutual fund. I'm sure you'll have other people on your channel that'll talk about that in detail, but you got to have a working knowledge of it. So when you're sitting back saying, I don't know if I want to do this anymore, you start to realize, but wait a minute, I got all of this stuff happening. And once you get to certain thresholds, that money starts working for you. And it does all the heavy lifting on its own.
Right.
And you start making more money from investment returns than you do in your job.
Yeah. Now that, yeah.
It's a whole thing.
That's the
Yeah.
goal.
Ooh.
Yeah, for sure.
That is the goal for sure, right, Reg?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
We're gonna get there. We'll get there. Okay, so Salvador, we have a segment for you that's gonna be called Real Life Story Rapid Fire Rounds. So what we're
Okay.
gonna do is ask you some questions and just give a rapid answer, using your real life as an example. Give us some real life examples. Okay, let's start with this one.
Sounds good.
All right. What's one money lesson you wish you had learned earlier in life?
If I would have known then what I know now, I would just start putting money away. Just a little bit, wouldn't touch it, pay myself before I pay anybody else. People would say that to me, it didn't make sense to me, but that's what I would do. I would just make sure even if I made $100, I'd put 10% of what I have away and just live with that.
All right. What do you think is the best financial decision you made that helped you later in life?
The best financial decision I ever made was not beating the brakes off of my buddy that gave me the book for my birthday, The 9 Steps to Financial Freedom. So when I was in my 20s, a buddy of mine for my birthday, and I'm just, we were partying like rock stars as we do in our 20s.
Oh yeah.
For my birthday, he brought me a book. And one of the books that he brought me one year was The 9 Steps to Financial Freedom. And at first I was thinking, what am I going to do with this book? But the last book he gave me, which was The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, was foundational in me developing my personal mission statement. And I saw what that was doing for me. So I read that book. And at that point, I knew different things existed. Couldn't execute all of them, but I knew mutual funds existed. I knew trusts existed. I knew all of these things, long-term care insurance existed. I started to understand those conceptually.
Uh-huh.
And by educating myself and understanding what those things were, that became the springboard for me to execute on other things as time went on.
Wow. I love that. It's like a ripple effect, waterfall effect. You
Yeah.
just, something will click if you just continue to learn. Something will click as you go and continue.
Barack Obama had a statement one time, and he said, everything that's happening right now is because of, not in spite of, everything that's ever happened in the world. And everything that's going to happen in the future is going to happen because of, not in spite of, what's happening right now. So when I look back, everything in my life is all connected.
Yeah.
And my thing now is I take all of that and I identify and use all of that, which is why I have a YouTube channel, because there's just too much to have in, one conversation. There's so many different pieces.
Yeah, for
Right,
sure.
right. Lots of moving pieces. Okay,
Yep.
what one money mistake do you wish you could warn others not to repeat?
Well, that's a good question. I think the easiest one is make sure that when you back in the day, there's this group called Belle Biv DeVoe.
Yep.
You may have
Oh,
heard of
yeah.
them.
Oh,
Yes.
And
yeah.
they had a song called Poison.
Yes.
And what they said was, don't trust a big butt and a smile. That girl is poison, right?
Yeah.
And what happens is, when we're younger, we don't really know ourselves well enough, and so we find spouses and we get
That's
with
true.
people that look good, but they may not necessarily be the best for us. And so
100%.
my advice would be, if I could go back, just be more discerning
Mm,
about who you choose, because if the two of you aren't on the same page with money,
mm,
then it's gonna have an issue. Because I was always a little bit more. I was the deferred gratification guy because I never had anything. So it's easy to have deferred gratification when you don't have anything. And
mhm,
she was in a similar boat, but she wanted to get it all now. And I was,
Mm.
I'm making good money. She wants it all now. She
mm,
spends, and so we were misaligned, and with that and a lot of other things. So I would say that be discerning with the person that you're with, and make sure that you talk about money and that you carry the same values as it relates to money, because that could make or break you, because it doesn't just mess with you financially, it also impacts
mhm.
you psychologically and your own personal belief in your ability to get to where it is that you want to.
Yeah, my mother used to always say, "Find somebody you're evenly yoked with." That was her favorite saying.
That
Uh,
is
Yeah.
real
so
great.
last rapid fire question: what is the biggest surprise you found about yourself in retirement, good or bad, or just what surprised you the most about retirement, good or bad?
I never knew. That's a great question. It's funny, because when I retired, I had no idea what this level of peace actually felt like,
Mm,
Mm,
because again, I was a guy that was fighting for people that look like me, fighting for women, fighting for immigrants, and a corporate environment to make sure everybody was treated fairly. So I was carrying a lot of that. I
mm,
had stress and just different situations I was in, and I've always put a lot of pressure on myself to not necessarily succeed, but just not to be okey doke, right? I always wanted to make sure that what I did was good, it was professional, it was right on, and that I knew that in order for me to continue to evolve, I had to be the smartest person in the room. So not the smartest, but to work harder than almost everybody else in the room. And so that builds layers on your shoulders. And what happens is,
mm,
I was just used to dealing with that type of pressure. So I was always on edge. I was always looking for the angle. I was always trying to, and so now in retirement, I don't have any of that.
mm,
And I never knew that a life existed without all of that pressure.
mm,
If you think about like some of the things that, if you think about the easiest way to characterize it, like I think about back when I was in high school or when I was in college, I used to say to myself, man, I can't wait to get out of school, because if all I had to do was work, life would be so much easier.
mm.
mm,
Because there's a sense that when school's off your back, things get easier. That's not necessarily the case. But now that in retirement, it's the same thing. I have all of this work, it's gone. And so there's a new layer of peace that I have. And I've gotten to this place where I don't really care about much else except for, well, I care about it, but I don't really focus on much else
mm,
except making sure that I maintain my peace and understand my peace. Because
mm.
once you hold it, it feels good. And you see other stuff coming from a mile away,
Mm.
because you're such a piece. And I just didn't, I had no, I don't, I'd say it's a surprise, 'cause I had no clue that that was even a thing. I didn't even, I thought people that were, that talked about peace were trying to be trying to be hippies or trying to follow some Buddhist thing or just full of themselves, full of ego, trying to show that the world doesn't, but it doesn't affect them, but it's actually a real thing.
Yeah.
So I think that would be the biggest, most impactful surprise.
Look, that's a great way to end the rapid fire because I'm with you, sir. Peace is you cannot pay for it. You just
Yeah,
can't.
That's
you
right.
can't. And to be in a position to help other people. So I could take, I have all this free time. I have free time, but I don't. But I'm able, I look at when people say, what do you do? I say, I'm just trying to change the world. Whether I'm at a community event, working with kids in the garden, or I'm at a festival helping people with gardening, or I'm on my channel doing a chat with Sabado, or doing stuff on my channel. It's all about making the world a little bit better because, honestly, I wasn't supposed to make it. I was an adopted kid, grew up in a neighborhood that had a 55% dropout rate, got hurt playing basketball, wasn't an academic. There's all of these things that I was always a little different, kind of, I don't want to say square, but I was always a little bit different because I always knew better. And so I never had like I was telling a friend of mine the other day, I never had a pair of Jordans. And I'm talking going back to the 80s when Jordans were new because I
Right.
could never afford them. So I never fit in. And so it's a whole experience. So if I'm able to do this, then other people can do some of the stuff that they want to do. Now, everything, I'm not the guy that says everything is possible, but you can get closer to what you want if you put in a little bit of effort.
I love that.
That is definitely the quote of the day.
Yes. So that's a perfect way to recap what we've learned from Sabado. A lot of the things we've learned tonight, but to recap, Sabado, you mentioned just be intentional. I think being intentional, looking at your expenses, like realistically sit down with if you have a spouse or a partner, or significant other, sit down and figure out, okay, what's coming in, what's going out. Like let's look at it. And then be intentional about maybe cutting some of those things back or cutting them out, whatever you feel comfortable with. And then maxing out your 401k. You might start doing 1% every quarter or something, increasing your 401k 1%, a little bit at a time. It's like how
As
do you
much
eat
as
an
you can.
elephant?
Yep.
One bite at a time. And I don't know if did I miss anything?
No, I don't think so. I mean, we tend to take things that we want and make them really complicated and then get frustrated that we can't get them. And I think that, again, it's, as I say in every video that I do, it's never my expectation everybody retire early, but it is my expectation that you live your best life. And when you talk to people, and I challenge anybody, the next 5 times that you talk to somebody and that's complaining about their life, sit back and take a look and say, how many of these things do they actually control? And you'd be surprised at how much people actually can control in their life. If you don't like dealing with this jive turkey over here, then why do you keep going over that jive turkey's house? If you're tired of having a credit card bill that's super high, then don't buy, then maybe peel back on buying that expensive item or whatever the case is, but again, there's a lot of things that are outside of our control, but there's a lot of things that are in our control.
In our
And I
control.
and I think it comes back to, I think we were talking a little bit before about mindset and stuff like that. If you really want something, then your behavior is going to demonstrate that you really want it. Dream, but no action, then you've kind of wasted my time because we all have dreams, but you're telling me, hey, Sabado, I want to retire at such and such time, but I'm not willing to do any of this other stuff. Well, you've just wasted my time because because there are steps and there are things, sacrifices that I had to make through the course of my career, just working and in life and so on, that allowed me to get to this place. So it's not as, there's nobody, you're not going to win the lottery, and nothing amazing. There's no amazing things that happen to people in their lives. It's just, it's diligence and it's intentionality and it's discipline. And not that you have to be an overly disciplined individual, but you have to, if you want something, you have to take ownership and try to get after it.
I will say with that point, whenever we really want something, we get it. We do what it takes to get it. So we can do it. We definitely can do it.
Given all the information you've given us today, if I say I'm your buddy, I call you, I'm like Sabado. Give me one piece of advice to get things started today. What would you say to
I'd say, well, I'm not a financial advisor, so I don't give advice. No, I'm just kidding.
them?
I would just say, I'd say get out of debt. You know, the most liberating feeling that I had was after I got divorced, I systematically went through and paid off all my debt. And the feeling that I had from being able to get my check and just say, okay, this check, I'm going to pay my rent. This check, I'm going to pay this bill over here. Cause you still get bills, you still got to pay your light bill and all that stuff.
For sure.
But, and then still having some money left over after paying, it was the most liberating thing. And because what a lot of people miss, and in different communities, it's to different degrees, is a lot of people miss that there's confidence that's built in success. So if you're broke every 2 weeks, then that's frustrating. That's aggravating because you don't have enough. You're trying to make $1 out of 15 cents. But then
True.
you get to where you have money just left over at the end of the month. That's a win. That's confidence. And you take those little pieces of confidence and you just continue to build on those things. And eventually you get to something bigger. I look at Barack Obama. There is nothing about Barack Obama that said he would be a president of the United States. There is nothing in his background. There is nothing, because we all knew a Barack Obama growing up.
Right. Right.
There was nothing in his background that told him, but he learned perseverance, he learned stick-to-itness, he learned all of these things and made different steps along the way that put him in position to learn different things, get to know different people. And a lot of the people that he had to interact with are people that didn't look like him. And I'll tell you, a lot of the information I get, I always call it the game. A lot of the GAME that people gave me, I was meeting people because I went to a junior college on the other side of town, and I was meeting people who were creating the means of production from a technology standpoint. It was the most, like, I look back and I'm like, wow, I knew that cat. But they would give me these pieces of information, and I could say that, well, people in my neighborhood, they don't do that. Well, if you stick with that mindset, then people in your neighborhood will continue to not do that. So get around people that are actually doing that, get past kind of our own fears of the unknown, and lace yourself up with some of that GAME, some of that information. It's just the way that it works. And when we get it, the other piece of that is that when we get it, I think we have an obligation to help other people, because conversations like this, they just don't happen as much as they should. And I don't care who you are.
Yeah.
People don't talk about money.
Yeah.
They don't talk about, and I don't think, and we don't talk about success. In a lot of cases, nobody has had this conversation, and there's a lot of people that think this conversation isn't for them. Up until about 1970, women couldn't get credit in their own names.
Yep.
So again, it's just getting into spaces that we haven't been in and having conversations that we didn't have before, not because we're trying to make a point, but because that information is going to be what helps us. And it just builds. And even if it's not for you, it could be for the next generation and so on.
100%. 100%.
I love that. Even if we get out, we can have those conversations in our dinner tables, within our families. We can start the conversations. We can start learning about money and financial literacy from other spaces and bring it in to our spaces, right? We need that, like you just said. We need that generational financial literacy. And so that's what we do here on the Wise Retirement Podcast, is talk to people like you and experts so that we can have conversation. We can learn from these people and yourself, and then bring it to our families. Because if we're not having that conversation, then what's going to happen to our future generations?
And I think what you guys are doing is great. There's I've watched you guys, and I've watched some videos, and I've seen some of the different people that come in, and they know what they're talking about, and they're able to talk about it in a way that makes sense to people, to me, or to people that may not necessarily have the information. And I think it's critical for those conversations to happen, because one of the things that I used to hear a lot is people say, well, we don't do that, black folks don't do this. And I'm like, well, why not?
Right.
But because we get mad that we don't have something, but then we have to, but there's things that we do, and that's not made for us. Like, well, because we're not there.
Salvador, what final word of encouragement would you offer me and Reg and everyone else listening?
Here's what I have to say is that I just think don't give up on your dream, whatever your dream is. If you have a dream, if you want to retire, because retirement isn't the end. Retirement is really just it's the transition to another stage of life. Figure out, instead of thinking about I want to retire, ask yourself two questions. Number one, what's my purpose? Why am I here? What is it that I'm here to do? What do I want my story to be at the end of the day? When I'm 90 years old telling my story, what do I want my story to be? I got a hell of a story too, but I haven't even, and I only tell the safe parts on YouTube. And then the other thing that I think is critically important is to ask yourself the key question of what would I do if I won the lottery? And then ask yourself, why can't I do some of those things now? Because if you ask somebody, they're going to say, I want to travel a lot. Okay, well, you can travel now, can't you? Yeah, then why don't you do that? Because what happens a lot of times is people will go towards retirement, but they don't really have an idea of what that really means. And they think it's you just go sit on the couch.
Okay.
But you do that, and then you end up with chronic disease, and it creates a whole other issue.
Right.
So have an idea of where it is that you want to go, know the story that you want to tell, so you know kind of who you are, and create that purpose around that. But also ask yourself, what would I do if I won the lottery, and how can I start doing those things now? Because then you start winding down. So while we have him, I'll tell you, because I think this, and you may edit it out, but here's something that I think is important to give you some perspective. So I'd mentioned that I'm going to be going to Atlanta in a couple weeks. My best friend lives in Atlanta, and we've grown up. I've known this since we were 16 years old. My best friend. He's with so he was working as a digital ad relationship guy, right? And so, but on the side, he was working with a group of guys that made or a guy that makes alkaline water bottles or cans alkaline water and sells it. Then he met a guy that grows hibiscus and is creating hibiscus teas and stuff. This is all in Georgia. And so, yeah, so this guy has 150 acres that he grows hibiscus on out there. So my buddy gets laid off, and he's like, oh, what am I going to do? And it's the second time he got laid off in like 3 years, because that's just the way the economy's gone, especially in that world. So now he jumped in both feet in to this hibiscus company, and now they have a hibiscus company that is doing alkaline hibiscus water, hibiscus teas, and a bunch of hibiscus products. Here's the other part about it, and most people don't know this, is that a majority of hibiscus in the U.S. is imported, largely from Nigeria. The guy that he's working with is Nigerian, and so I'm going out as a master gardener to talk about that, and I'm going to talk about it a little bit on the channel. The reason I tell you this story is that what he's gone into without going into it is he's gone into that slope of early retirement. See, because retirement doesn't mean you sit on the couch. Retirement means you can do some of the things that you want to do. And so I would recommend that everybody find something else that they can do to make a little bit of money, even if it's starting a YouTube channel, because you can make a couple dollars on a YouTube channel. Some people get a lot of money on YouTube channels.
Okay.
But to find something like that. So I think it's important, because as many folks as there are in Atlanta, there's only one person with a hibiscus farm. And that's my best friend's buddy that's out there. And he fell into that as a side hustle, and now it's his full-time thing. Now he's making money. And in the food and beverage space, when people buy your company, because Coca-Cola is based out there, when people buy those companies, they don't buy them for millions, they buy them for billions. And so if they end up getting bought, then I got to figure out what to do with a best friend that's a billionaire. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah, you might have your hands full there.
I might have my hands full. So.
All right. Well, lastly, tell us how people can reach out to you. I know we found you, but how can others reach out and maybe get some of this good advice from?
Yeah. So my channel is Ask Sabado, and that's AskSabado, the Everyday Retiree, because that's who I am. I'm Sabado, I'm the Everyday Retiree. And you can also find me on my website, which is www.asksabado.com. And Sabado is Sabado. And on my website, you could set up contact, so that way we're in communication. You could sign up for a chat with Sabado. So you go to my website, and there's a contact form you could put in when it works. And I try to have them pretty quickly. And we talk for an hour, and it's all free. I don't charge anybody for anything because I'm just tired of people trying to sell me stuff, and I'm not going
Right.
to do that to anybody else.
Right.
It's all free. It's conversation. It's, as I like to say, straight up, no chaser. And you get like what you're getting now is what you get from what it's on my channel, and it's who I am because I don't know how to be anybody else.
Perfect.
Right.
Perfect.
Um,
Don't be surprised if you look up and you see my name on there. So
hey, I'd be honored. I'd be honored. And I do want to say I do think that what you guys are doing, I think is great. I like the fact that I like the way that you guys get after it, and you structure it, and you get people some really good information. I think it's just a matter of time before the algorithm understands that, because there's just not a lot of people doing that right now.
well, I appreciate that. And as another thing I wanted to say, from your mouth to God's ears, we are working hard at it. Ange came up with this a while back, and he was like, "Reg, this is it." And I'm like, "I think you're right." So, here we are bringing on great guests like you, to help the community out. So I think
Mhm.
I feel like we're in a good space, and I'm hoping that other people as well.
I believe that. So that brings us to the end of this episode. But Sabado, we really appreciate you being on a show with us, and we hope you come back.
Absolutely. We
Thanks.
do appreciate you, sir. And we hope that everybody else out there has enjoyed the show. If it has helped you in any way at all, hit subscribe, share, do all the things so that you can get this information like others have as well.
That's right, Reg. And, check out our show highlights on our Substack, which is a link in the description below.
Absolutely. Well, I'm Reg. Thanks, Salvador, for coming on.
Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
No, thank
I'm
you.
glad it worked out. So I'm Angela Kay, reminding you that we are all on this journey together. Until next time, take care.
Welcome to the ride.